JMU is ranked in the top 25. Georgia State hangs on. And let's recap week 8. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I am your host, Dave Schultz. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, we'll talk about JMU first, then Georgia State's win over the Cajuns. I was there at that ball game, and then we'll recap the rest of Week 8 as well. Lots going on in the Sun Belt, but the big news on Sunday is that JMU is finally ranked in the top 25 in both polls. Second time that JMU has ever been ranked, although don't look at what happened the following week. Now, that had to do with Todd Centeio being injured, but Georgia Southern beat him last year after getting ranked in the top 25. Not sure that's going to happen this year with ODU, but we'll see. All of a sudden, ODU is right there with Georgia State, 3-1, right behind JMU. So congratulations to Curt Cignetti and everybody connected with the JMU program. Being in the top 25 is fun. Everyone on campus is going to be lifted up. They're all going to be walking with an extra hop in their step. The national media is going to be on JMU, right? This is becoming a story that they can't get to a good bowl game. Shane Metlin from the Daily Record Sports, all over the story. They won't play in a New Year's Six-Day Bowl. It stinks. It's a crappy rule. It is what it is. So you got to make the best of it until it changes, until someone changes. I mean, maybe you get some sort of, I don't know, attorney general to sue, I guess. It sort of worked for well, not sort of, it worked for North Carolina. I guess you could look at it that way. But basically, the NCAA is telling JMU, wait your turn. All right. You agreed to it. It was 2 years. You knew it at the time. Now, because you're good, you want to play in a bowl game, which, again, it's a bad rule. It's a stupid rule. Again, the amount of money, I think it's gone from I'm not kidding you, like $5,000 to $5 million to go from FCS to FBS. They don't want teams to do that anymore. I was told by somebody in the sport that the reason and we've talked about this before, that the reason they don't want teams doing this on a regular basis is because they think they'll get all of the proper facilities and recruit at a higher level than they were before and then drop back down. Well, again, it's easy to fix, right? First, if you come up, you got to stay there for 10 years. And if you go back down, never, ever, 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 ever are you coming back. It's not difficult to fix. But it's the NCAA, and, they are what they are. But JMU should be proud, all right? They didn't have the prettiest win against Marshall, right? 20-9. But Curt Cignetti quickly figured out that Marshall could not move the ball without Rasheen Ali, who was banged up. And they got, they have 8 sacks of Cam Fancher. Jalen Green had, hold on. Jalen Green had 5 of them. I was right on that. And Curt Cignetti took a much more conservative approach to the ball game because he didn't have to be aggressive. This is not the normal what Marshall has been playing, right? Despite Marshall's lack of defense lately, they've put up 400 yards of offense on their own, and I'm not sure they got 200 yards against James Madison. They didn't, right? They did not. They had -4 yards of rushing. Of course, that goes, the sacks come into play with that, but you understand. So JMU is ranked. They're going to get a lot of featured stories on them now if they can stay ranked for a couple of weeks. Okay. I think people within the industry know who Curt Cignetti is. And, you're going to get a lot of other people carrying the water if JMU handles this right. If they go all UCF, then you're going to turn people off. If you let other people carry it for you, say like Charles Woodson, right? I mean, ESPN, Chris Fowler in particular, did a really good job of pumping up Charles Woodson for the Heisman Trophy, and he won it. And if you let other people make your case for you, maybe you can have a chance. But on Twitter's not real life. But we'll see. Again, Shane Metlin from the Daily. Again, Daily News Record Sports. Daily's News Record. He is getting comments after comments. Go check out his Twitter feed and his stories. He's doing a great job. Again, we got to see if we can get him on the show this week to discuss because it is worth discussing. But it just seems like the NCAA is saying, yeah, we know, tough. That doesn't change the fact that, for lack of a better phrase, if JMU keeps on winning, they can keep on, sticking a middle finger to the NCAA because, again, all these teams above them are going to be playing each other for the next 6 weeks. I mean, let's check out, quickly, we can check out, the top 25. Let's see if we got them this week. Yes. Okay. So, I mean, right above James Madison is USC and UCLA. Those two teams are playing each other, right? Duke is 20th. Louisville is 18. Those two teams are going to play each other. You got LSU and Ole Miss and Missouri have already all played. All right. So those two teams will play each other. Those teams that I've mentioned will play each other. And then you got the teams above them. And who knows when and if and when some of these, the bottom falls out. The higher James Madison gets, then all of a sudden, Penn State drops from 3 to 10. Well, then they're going to lose to Michigan. Then they'll drop further. And so, James Madison can find themselves top 15 by the end of it and maybe even higher. We'll see. You still do have, Air Force is undefeated. They're 19th. Right? If this was a 12-team playoff, they'd be on the cusp. All right. But, you got Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State. Two of those teams are playing each other, obviously. You got Florida State. Washington still has to deal with, Oregon State. They may have to deal with Oregon again. So we'll see what happens with Washington. They were not very impressive this week. So, again, congrats to James Madison. It's a great accomplishment. It's going to get the Sun Belt a ton of publicity, all week long. Just don't lay an egg like we did last year. So it's good for the Sun Belt. We'll see if other teams can get in there, right? Troy's having a good season. South Alabama has been impressive lately. And all of a sudden their win over Oklahoma State is looking a lot better than it did before, when Oklahoma State looked like they were awful. When it looked like they were just awful. All right, let's take a timeout. When we come back, we'll start to recap Week 8. We have a heck of a win by Georgia State. They barely hung on. It did not look like it was going to go in their direction, and it did. And then we'll recap the rest of Week 8 as well. But right now, let me tell you about Athletic Brewing. Because we could go in a couple of different ways, a couple of different directions in this, right? With the Game Changer of the Week. Now time for your Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Much like, I'm going to go with Gavin Pringle. I know Jalen Green had 5 sacks. Very worthy candidate. But I'm going to go with Gavin Pringle. Athletic Brewing Company has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually tastes good. Gavin Pringle makes the interception for Georgia State. And what a turnaround that is. It's not only that Georgia State goes to 5-1, then 6-1, and goes to 3-1 in the Sun Belt, and the Cajuns drop to 4-3 and 1-2 in the Sun Belt. Georgia State now heads into Georgia Southern with some momentum instead of, blowing a 20-0 lead. It's not sometimes, in the NFL and professionally, it's win and move on. Not in college, it isn't. And sometimes when you blow a 20-0 lead, that one sticks with you for a little bit longer than it should. And this game is on a short week. And now Georgia State goes into that ball game with momentum compared to being distraught and having to get ready for the Eagles. Athletic Brewing Company has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good full flavor and well-crafted, just like a full-strength beer. You can find Athletic Brewing Company's non-alcoholic brews at a store near you or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers use code LOCKEDON to get 15% off your first order online. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewingcompany.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's recap that Georgia State Raging Cajuns ball game because it was quite the ball game. The Panthers win it 20-17, and for all intents and purposes should have been leading by much more. They started with an 11-play, 72-yard drive that should have resulted in a touchdown, but it resulted in a Marcus Carroll fumble and heads-up play by Darren Granger to get Kendra Gant, who picked up the fumble and saved a touchdown. Now, he's the only one. No one else was going to catch Gant. And although they only got past the 30 or right to the 35-yard line of the Cajuns, if Granger doesn't make the tackle, nobody else is. So, but nonetheless, Georgia State scored 20 points. It was an odd ball game, right? Georgia State scored all 20 points in the second quarter. Both teams were shut out. Like the over-under of this was like 60, and it wasn't even close, especially after the fumble to begin the game. And then UL had a drive, and Kenny Almendaris misses a field goal. He doesn't miss field goals. He's hit 18 in a row. I don't think he's missed since last year. And so that was a big deal. So Georgia State takes a 20-0 lead. And just to make it a little bit more personal, so my mom was here, and it was a late game, 7 o'clock ball game. She's not staying until, it's over, and I got to go do the Rage on the radio, the Raging Cajuns post-game show. And so I'm going to take her back to the hotel and come back, and I'll be back around halftime, right? Or I'll be back right before it starts, third quarter. Even if I miss 5 minutes, no big deal. Well, Georgia State makes it 20-0. We leave. We get down the elevator. The Cajuns had already punted away. And by the time we leave the stadium, Georgia State had fumbled the ball. Before we got to the car, the Cajuns had scored a touchdown and made it 20-7. Cajuns come out in the second half. They get the ball. They're about to go 3 and out, but they fake a punt, and Dylan Cambry had to make a move. Like, this play was well defended. This did not fake anybody out. No. Cambry made the Panther defender miss, and the Cajuns go down, can't score a touchdown, but they get a field goal, and it's 20-10. And, Georgia State did nothing in the second half. Nothing. They almost had 300 yards in the first half. They had 45 in the second half. Let's go over those. I want to go over the Georgia State possessions in the second half. 3 plays, 8 yards, punt. 3 plays, 5 yards, punt. 10 plays, 41 yards, punt. That was interesting. They tried to kick a field goal. They raced a lineman on late. Sean Elliott calls timeout, changes his mind, and punts, and it's down at the 1-yard line. That paid off. Cajuns go 3 and out, but so did the Panthers. Now the Cajuns have a shot with about 7 minutes to go. It's 20-17, by the way. Cajuns got another touchdown. In fact, they had scored on basically 3 straight possessions after the fumble in the first half. So the Cajuns get the ball, and they had 1st and 25. They converted 1st and 25. And you're wondering if they can run out the clock, right? A little game management there, right? Maybe kick a field goal so there's like 30 seconds or less left to go. Maybe even less. And all of a sudden, they're inside the 10-yard line. They can get a first down inside the 5. And they ran it a couple of times, and they're sitting at 3rd and 4. And the best offense was Zeon Christ running the ball. All right. The Cajuns did not have a great game offensively. This team averages 35 points a ball game. Georgia State shut them out for 28 and a half minutes in the first half. That's pretty good. All right. And if it wasn't for a fumble, they would have shut them out, period. Zeon Christ was 14 of 28 for 106 yards. Running the ball was the best offense. for the Cajuns. Zeon Christ, 17 carries, 119 yards. Everybody else was, they got 21 carries and 46 yards. So not really good. Zeon Christ was the only one who could do anything. And it's 3rd and 4. The Cajuns actually, I think a penalty was called, or maybe a player got hurt. Maybe a Georgia State player got hurt. And so when it wasn't a penalty, but maybe the player got hurt, the referee started the play clock with like 1:04 to go, the game clock as well. Cajuns took it all the way down. They called timeout at third with 38 seconds left to go. And I thought, well, they'll run the ball. And if they get a first down, great. They can pass it a couple times if they want to at that point in time. They have some timeouts. They can still run it. But you don't want to give Georgia State enough time. And Zeon Christ throws an interception. And if you see the pass, I don't know who he's throwing it to. Peter LeBlanc is there, but that's not where the ball was thrown. So I'm not exactly sure what happened on the play. Bad decision or poor, a really poor throw. I'm sure no one feels as bad as Zeon Christ, but that's a really tough way to end the ball game when you have a shot to kick the game-tying field goal and your defense hasn't given up anything in the second half. You got a real shot to win the ball game. In the game, Darren Granger was really good until he came out of the game. 17 to 22, 211 yards and a couple of touchdowns. Then he got hit in the head, and you had Calasuro come in. He actually scored a touchdown to make it 20-0, but then he fumbled to allow the Cajuns to get on the board. I got to figure, I'm sure he passed some sort of protocol, but it wasn't the same Georgia State football team after Granger got hit in the head while fumbling the ball. So I don't know if that's why they didn't call it a targeting. He was, he's going down. The Cajuns player is going down. He definitely got hit above the shoulders. But give it up to Georgia State and Gavin Pringle. Again, he's the, Athletic Brewing Company game changer of the week. It's a big interception. If he drops that ball, if he drops it, the Cajuns tie it up and have a good shot at winning. And so that's a big job. It's really important for Georgia State to come away with that victory. It's one thing to lose the game, right? Like if the Cajuns lost that game the way they probably should have, 35-10 or 28-17. It's one thing to lose the way they did. That's painful. I'm not sure it's quite as painful as if Georgia State blew a 20-0 lead. All right, that would have been a brutal loss for Georgia State. But they're 6-1 overall, 3-1 in the conference. Cajuns 4-3 overall, 1-2 in the conference. All right, let's take a timeout. We'll do the rest of week 8 and maybe start to look ahead to week 9. I'll be the first to tell you, I didn't know about the Oyster Bowl. I think that's hilarious. And that's a huge win for ODU. Let me tell you about PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a skill-based, real money daily fantasy sports game. How does it work? You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will go more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. At PrizePicks, you aren't competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks. PrizePicks entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. PrizePicks offers a recently improved deposit and withdrawal experience, including the option to use Apple Pay for quick deposits into your account. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $1,000. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's check out the rest of the Sunbelt. Remember, we had a couple of ball games early on in the week that James Madison beat Marshall 20-9. South Alabama embarrassed Southern Miss on Tuesday 55-3. We already did those ball games. Georgia Southern, I don't know if they started looking ahead or not, but they had a big 31-14 lead at half, and then just kind of mailed it in the second half. Interesting. Also, it should be noted, and I don't know this, Blake Murphy came in for Jaya Wright. Blake Murphy, or maybe it was the other way around. Blake Murphy, 18-33, 320 yards, touchdown and an interception. Jaya Yeah, let me see. Hold on a second. Hold on. Yeah, Jai Wright started and Blake Murphy came in and ignited him. And I wouldn't say got him close. Did they get him to where it was? Well, they did. They were down 31-7, and he got him to 31-28. It's been a tough year for ULM. I mean, a real tough year for ULM. Punch gut. Georgia Southern 5-2, 2-1 in the conference. Nice bounce back win after a tough loss to the aforementioned JMU Dukes. Warhawks dropped to 2-5, 0-4 in the conference. All right, we had a really good ball game. Didn't see any of it, but Old Dominion takes down App State 28-21 in the Oyster Bowl, which is awesome. Old Dominion explodes for 17 points in the second quarter. Grant Wilson back at the helm, 18 out of 25, and a touchdown. Kadarius Callaway, 104 yards on the ground, but it was Keyshawn Wicks that scored 2 rushing touchdowns. Joey Aguilar, not bad. App State quarterback, 22 of 31 with 2 touchdowns. He threw it for 252 yards, but no Nate Noel. So no Nate Noel, and yet Kanye Roberts still ran 26 times, 102 yards. Big win for ODU. They are tied with Georgia State for basically first in the Sun Belt East. No, that's not the way people look at it. But with JMU undefeated. But, good job by ODU. No turnovers in the game. Few penalties. ODU, 409 yards. 221 on the ground. That's a good job by ODU. I can only imagine what the Mountaineer fans were saying about Sean Clark. That's going to be a tough pill to swallow. They were a 10-point favorite on the road or not. All right, Coastal Carolina survives. They take down Arkansas State 27-17. The big story out of this one is that Grayson McCall really did take a shot to the head. I would tell you by the way I saw the hit, he looked more like he was out cold than severely injured. They did report that he was on back. I think he spent the night in Jonesboro being evaluated. And I think earlier on Sunday, he was taken back he made his way back to Conway. So he appears to be okay. Should also mention J.J. Roberts from Marshall. He got hit hard in that ball game, and that was an issue. And I think he is on the mend as well. So those are 2 good things. Probably was a little bit of a cheap shot from Arkansas State. I'm not sure if it was done intentionally or what the case is. Did see it on Twitter, and then I found it on the ESPN Plus broadcast. And again, just the way he was lying there was more like Grayson was passed out, knocked out, unconscious, than severely injured. He was taken away in an ambulance, but the good news is he's okay. At least heading back home. All right. Another tough loss for Arkansas State. They dropped to 1-2 in the Sun Belt, 3-4 overall. Coastal 4-3. They are 2-2 in the Sun Belt. All right. Week 9 coming up. You got a huge ball game Thursday. Georgia Southern hosting Georgia State. Big ball game. Will set the tone for November and beyond. This could take down Georgia State. Obviously, could separate Georgia State from at least Georgia Southern. All right, and keep the Panthers atop, if you will, the Sun Belt East. Cajuns are playing South Alabama in Mobile, planning on going to the game. We'll see if those plans work out. That is 4:00 on Saturday. Right now, it's just on ESPN Plus. App State hosting Southern Miss. That's on ESPN Plus. Monroe and Arkansas State are on ESPN Plus. That's a 4:00 ball game. Coastal hosting Marshall. That's a 5 p.m. game. NFL Network. Big ball game out west. Texas State hosting Troy. I think both those teams were off this week. And Texas State had that big win a couple weeks ago, come from behind to beat ULM after a tough loss to the Cajuns. Both teams 5-2. And both teams 2-1. Should be a good matchup. And James Madison on Saturday night, here you go. They get ODU at home, ESPNU, nationally televised ball game. And it's going to be 3.5 hours of why JMU should be allowed to go to a bowl game and being a New Year's 6-day bowl. All right. So let the broadcasters, let the mouthpieces do the work for you, because that's what's going to happen. All right. We'll do more of week 9, if you will, later on in the week. But thank you so much for tuning in. We're still about 760 subscriptions. Really appreciate it. We set records again for the audio download, so that is up. Don't forget, if you are listening in Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. You can also find us in Spotify. You can find us anywhere you get your podcast from. Just search Locked On Sunbelt. All right, once again, thank you so much for watching and listening to Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.